Many people think of the politician William Wilberforce when they think of the movement that helped put an end to slavery in England. Although Wilberforce did much to change public policy, however, he couldn't have done it without people like Thomas Clarkson, who changed public opinion. In 1785, Clarkson entered Cambridge University's Latin essay contest. The topic that year? Is it lawful to make slaves of others against their will? He spent 2 months researching and writing his paper. He was horrified by the discoveries that he had made. After winning first place, he got on his horse and he rode back to London to pursue a career as a clergyman. Partway through his journey, he dismounted his horse and sat on the side of the road. And he sat there simply thinking about all the gory details that he had learned about regarding the slave trade. He later wrote,
"Here a thought came to my mind that if the contents of the essay were true, it was time some person should see these calamities to their end."
Clarkson's research of the injustice convinced him to devote his life to ending the slave trade. He traveled across England to get first-hand testimonies from people who had been on the slave ships. He published a book, Abstract of the Evidence, which, in a time before photography, described the gory details of slave ships and plantations. When he gave presentations, he graphically demonstrated, with chains and shackles, how slaves were treated inhumanely. In his book, Bury the Chains, Prophets and Rebels in a Fight to Free an Empire's Slaves, Adam Hochschild wrote about the abolitionists who gathered at a printing shop in England back in 1787 in order to strategize about ending the slave trade. In describing their perspective, he explains that societal change came after the brutal, ugly facts of injustice were exposed. He wrote,
"They believed that because human beings had a capacity to care about the suffering of others, exposing the truth would move people to action. We are clearly of opinion," Granville Sharp wrote to a friend later that year in 1787, "that the nature of the slave trade needs only to be known to be detested. It was this faith that led Thomas Clarkson to buy handcuffs, shackles, and thumbscrews to display to the people he met on his travels, and that led him to mount his horse again and again to scour the country for witnesses who could tell Parliament what life was like on the slave ship and the plantations. The riveting parade of first-hand testimony he and his colleagues put together in the Abstract of the Evidence and countless other documents is one of the first great flowerings of a very modern belief that the way to stir men and women to action is through vivid, unforgettable description of acts of great injustice done to their fellow human beings. The abolitionists placed their hope in human empathy."
In 1788, Clarkson and other abolitionists began using one of their most powerful tools, the sketching of the inside of a slave ship, Brooks. Hochschild describes the sketch.
"The diagram gave measurements in feet and inches while showing the slaves closely lined up in rows, lying flat, bodies touching one another or the ship's hull. The diagram began appearing in newspapers, magazines, books, and pamphlets. Realizing what a powerful new weapon it had, the Abolitionist Committee also promptly printed up more than 7,000 copies as posters, which were hung on the walls of homes and pubs throughout the country."